Hello, and welcome back to the Cyber Resilience Brief, a Safe Breach podcast. I'm your host, Tova Dvorin, and with me today is our co host and senior sales engineer at Safe Breach, Adrian Culley. Today, we're diving into a threat actor that's been making headlines for all the wrong reasons. You may have heard of them. They are called Scattered Spider, and they're poisonous. Scattered Spider is a perfect example of how the most dangerous threats aren't always about complex malware. Sometimes it's just about exploiting human nature. Adrian, what can you tell us?
Scattered Spider, let's look at their web and see how far it goes. For our listeners who might not be familiar, Scattered Spider, which is also tracked by other names such as UNC 3944, Octopus with a K, and Muddled Libra, is less of a traditional structured gang and more of a decentralized collective. They've hit some of the biggest names in business, from MGM to Marks and Spencer's in the UK. They're a group of young, apparently native English speaking individuals, some of whom are as young as 16, primarily from the US and UK. They organise and collaborate on underground forums and chat apps such as Discord and Telegram. Think of it as a loose knit but highly effective network.
I have so many questions about how 16-year-olds have time to be international hackers, but I guess we'll get to that later.
Well, we'll pull apart some of the elements, but never dismiss anybody because of their age. Or personally, I'm not a big fan of the phrase "script kiddie." I think it's pejorative, and very often, just because somebody's young doesn't mean they're not talented. However, we'll get later on as to who may or may not be behind this particular group.
Well, age aside, what does the hierarchy there look like? Who's behind it?
Well, their origins trace back to early 2022, but they've rapidly evolved. They started with basic SIM swapping and phishing attacks, often targeting telecommunications companies as a stepping stone onto other targets. They'd use these initial compromises to then pivot to high value targets. Their reputation really exploded with the high profile attacks on major corporations in 2023, and they've pretty much been relentless ever since.
So they definitely have the means and the opportunity. The question is, what's their main motive?
Great question, Tova. It appears to be purely financial, appears stressed there. They're not politically motivated themselves or looking for notoriety outside of the cybercrime community. Their goal is to steal data and demand massive ransoms or simply extort money by threatening to leak sensitive information. The only incongruity here is their skill level and tradecraft. Attribution in all things cyber is a subtle and delicate art, and it's easy to get wrong. Exactly who is behind Scattered Spider and training and equipping them remains very unclear.
Interesting. And from what we've seen so far, their attacks seem to be less about 0 days and more about social engineering. So even if we don't have a good grasp on what their exact background is, let's reverse engineer this. Can you break down their primary tactics, techniques, and procedures, or TTPs?
Absolutely, we have a very strong grasp of the attack code used by Scattered Spider, their TTPs across the cyber kill chain. In a nutshell, they're masters of deception. Their entire methodology is built on a human first approach. They don't so much break in as log in. Why would you go to all that cleverness across the kill chain when you can just log in?
Hmm.
And their tactic, techniques, and procedures are a mix of technical know how and psychological manipulation. It all starts with reconnaissance. They'll scour LinkedIn, social media, and business websites to build a profile of a target employee. They're looking for someone with a level of access, maybe in IT or a senior role, and then they strike.
So they're highly specific. To use a classic analogy, it's not just phishing, they're spear phishing and possibly at a whole nother level.
Precisely. Let's take a look at their key TTPs. Broadly, three areas: vishing and help desk impersonation. This is their signature move. They'll use the information they've gathered to call an organization's IT help desk, impersonating a legitimate employee who's locked out. They'll use just enough personal details to pass security questions and convince a help desk agent to reset a password or, even worse, re enroll a new multi factor authentication device. Secondly, multi factor authentication push bombing, something you may not be familiar with. They'll gain a user's password and then flood their phone with repeated MFA push notifications. The hope is that the employee, out of frustration or confusion, will hit just accept to make notifications stop. Once they do, the attackers are in. We may all think we may never fall for that, but people do. The trigger there is if you didn't generate multi-factor authentication verification, Contact your IT security and help desk instantly. And the third area is SIM swapping. They'll trick a mobile carrier into porting the target phone's number to a SIM card they control. This allows them to intercept SMS based multi factor authentication codes and take over accounts.
So essentially, they find the path of least resistance. What happens once they're inside?
That's exactly the route they're taking, Tova. Very efficient and effective. Once they have initial access, their attacks are fast and furious. They quickly pivot to lateral movement and privilege escalation. They'll use legitimate native tools already on the network, a technique called living off the land, to avoid detection. They'll also install remote access tools like AnyDesk to maintain persistence. Their goal is to find critical data or gain access to systems that are ripe for extortion, like virtualized environments. They will also evade your security controls whenever possible.
All of this is very intelligent and actually exactly how we think a hacker would work, right? Being able to go in with the path of least resistance and then avoid detection. So, what makes Scattered Spider itself so nefarious? A lot of this to me just sounds like hacker common sense.
At the technical level, they're demonstrating very sharp expertise and efficiency in breaking in, securing, encrypting data, issuing demands, and of course, around the Western world, major disruption this year and really over the last 2 years. I hate to say it, but they're efficient at what they do. It's cost hundreds of millions to the businesses who've been unfortunate to be their victims. Amongst the most high profile of these were MGM Resorts and Caesars Entertainment in 2023. A huge wake up call. For MGM Resorts, the attack shut down their slot machines, reservation systems, and hotel operations for days, cost them over 100 million. They reportedly didn't pay the ransom, which is always a good idea. Please be aware, people, if you pay a ransom, you're funding organised crime at best, espionage and hostile foreign nation states at worst. It often also goes to terrorism. Please do not pay ransoms, no matter what anybody else says to you. You're making the problem bigger. Allegedly, Caesars Entertainment did pay the ransom for 15 million. Again, all that does is exposes you to further ransom demands. They don't give up. Scattered Spider did exfiltrate a massive amount of customer data from Caesars. More recently, they've been linked to attacks on major retailers like Marks and Spencer's and airlines like Qantas, very well known. These attacks demonstrate their adaptability and how they're able to shift industries and targets with ease.
Right, now, I suspect we've answered our own question here, but what does make them so hard to stop? What makes Scattered Spider untouchable?
Well, from an investigation perspective, there are a few things. First, their decentralized nature makes them hard to track and disrupt. When it's a terrorist cell structure, when one cell gets shut down, another pops up. Secondly, their reliance on social engineering means traditional endpoint security tools often miss their initial entry point. They're logging on, not breaking in, as we mentioned earlier. The malicious activity is often carried out using legitimate credentials and tools. They're also known to monitor instant response calls. Please, 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 people, always, even if people are camera shy, validate who's on all group calls you have, whether it's Zoom, um, Microsoft Teams, any group call. Don't allow people to have their cameras switched off. Get them to authenticate. They can switch it off again once you've done that. But seriously, Scattered Spider are turning up to instant response calls and getting away with it. So that what they're doing is they're learning about what's going on, and they're adapting their tactics in real time based on how a company is responding. However, they do have an Achilles heel. They're not strong on tradecraft, which has led to arrests and ongoing prosecutions. Essentially, tradecraft in this context is the art of operating discreetly and effectively in a clandestine environment. They and groups associated with them have committed major operational security faux pas, which has been their undoing. Simply, as disruptive as they are not as skilled in this area by a long way as those investigating them, and many of them are awaiting trial. Attribution is hard in cybersecurity investigations, and misattribution is easy. There are many ongoing investigations, I mentioned, peeling back the layers of Scattered Spider and their associates and who else they are affiliated with.
So let me see if I can pick up what you're putting down there. Essentially, what we're saying is that Scattered Spider is great in getting into systems and exfiltrating data, but they're not great at keeping their own activities secret. That's their weakness.
And their personal identities, Tova. I don't want to give away too much of what's known about them, but they've done a very poor job of keeping their personal lives and their hacking lives separate. And this has tripped many of them up. Hence, some are in prison awaiting trial, some are in prison overseas awaiting extradition. And we're going to be hearing a lot more about certain members, and they're clearly being processed and interviewed as we speak. Allegedly, people in very high-profile positions have been found and identified, and we'll find out a lot more as their court cases progress.
Looking forward to seeing some follow-up news. Okay, so how can organizations and how can our listeners defend against a threat like Scattered Spider?
So, the key is to focus on identity and access management. You need to build a resilient human firewall. Very simply, and it's good security advice for all businesses wherever you are. Phishing-resistant multi-factor authentication. Move away from SMS-based or simple push notifications. Implement stronger phishing-resistant methods like number matching multi-factor authentication or physical security keys. Help desk hardening. Help desks are such an Achilles heel. It's a prime target everywhere. Institute strict verification protocols that go beyond basic personally identifiable information. Use a multi-approval verification process for high-risk changes like password and MFA resets. And pay particular scrutiny if you've outsourced your IT help desks. I'm sorry, but outsourcing is not abrogation of security responsibility. If you use a help desk, it's your responsibility to make sure that they're secure. And,
Uh-huh.
and lastly, continuous education. Regularly train employees on social engineering tactics. Help them understand it's okay to question a request. In fact, give them permission to question requests, even if it seems to be from an internal source. Of course, within the wrapper of all of this, constantly simulate attacks. Use a platform like SafeBreach to continuously validate your security controls against the tactics, techniques, and procedures of threat actors like Scattered Spider. This enables you to identify and fix gaps before an attacker can exploit them. We know a huge amount about Scattered Spider across the kill chain, from infiltration through to host level, all the lifting off the land, lateral movement, and ending at exfiltration.
Right. And this is one of those times that it's not just about technology, it's about the people and the processes. And that's why you can't rely on CVE based tools alone. You have to rely on tools like SafeBreach, which zero in on the identity and access management issues in your systems as well.
Exactly, Tova. Scattered Spider proves that human and procedural vulnerabilities are often the biggest security holes. By focusing on these areas, organizations can significantly increase their cyber resilience.
All right. Thanks again for that incredibly insightful breakdown, Adrian. That's all the time we have for today. We'll be back soon with another episode of the Cyber Resilience Brief, wherever you get your podcasts. Remember, stay safe with SafeBreach. The Cyber Resilience Brief is a SafeBreach podcast. It's produced by Tova Dvorin and executive produced by Adrian Culley. Sound design provided by Adobe Podcasts. Distribution provided by Podbean and extra support and love from the SafeBreach team. For more information on how adversarial exposure validation through SafeBreach can protect you and your business, no matter where you reside or what industry you're in, please visit us at www.safebreach.com.